Hi friends, in this session we are conducting an interview and we have with us Ms. Vinitha Rachel Verghese. She is a PhD candidate at the University of Illinois, Chicago. This interview is made to create an awareness on joining for a PhD in US. Hello Vinitha, welcome to this session. What are the eligibility criteria for applying for a PhD in US?
The eligibility criteria for a PhD program in the US is a 4-year degree certificate. So you should have, if you have a 4-year bachelor's degree certificate, you are eligible to apply for a PhD program in the US. But the thing is, in particular for Indians, we don't have a lot of programs which offer a 4-year bachelor's degree course. So which makes our criteria slightly different, because if we have to apply for a PhD program, we cannot go with a bachelor's degree because it's 3 years. So which is why we would need a master's to apply for a PhD in the US. So the eligibility criteria for Indians to apply for a PhD in the US is a master's degree, or if it is a 4-year bachelor's degree.
What are the preparations have you done for applying in US? Should we register with any educational consultancies?
To apply for a PhD program in the US, you do not have to register with any educational consultancy, but it requires a lot of planning at an individual level. So if you are planning to join the PhD program in August 2021, you need to start planning at least from July 2020, which is extremely important. You can do it at an individual level because most of these things are available online. You don't have to spend money on, with an educational consultancy. There's not much role that they can do at a PhD program as far as I understand. So start your preparations. So begin by planning when do you want to join a PhD program, and then go back. So if you're planning to join, as I said, in August 2021, you should start your planning in July 2020.
Can you give us a timeline on the planning process?
Here is a timeline for how you should plan a year ahead. So let's say you're planning to join in August 2021. This July, July 2020, you're going to sit down, you're going to sit and decide what is your broad area of interest. So if it is in economics, I was very clear that I wanted to do something in education. So I was very clear that I want to be working and studying in a department where the faculty and other students are engaged in research related to education. So I was very clear, you don't have to be. You may just be at the stage, when applying, you may at the stage be at a stage where you are like, that you want to be in academia. You know that you want to do a PhD, that you want to do a PhD in economics. You're not very sure about which field in particular, but you may know that you want to do whether you want to do microeconomics or macroeconomics. Probably that, or that whether you want to do applied economics or theoretical economics. So this is the first stage. You are going to sit back and think that what is your comparative advantage? What are you good at? What gives you more happiness when you considering what you have learned until now, considering you have done your bachelor's and your master's, and probably you have some work experience, what motivated you to go for a PhD. So can I try to identify as narrow as possible a field of interest, but even if you can't, it's okay. But that's the first step. And so that's what you do in like around July. You start in July beginning, you start identifying your interest, and you simultaneously search online for universities. So you first take something called REPEC, REPEC, REPEC ranking for US universities in economics. So if it is in economics, this is how I would do. What is a REPEC ranking for universities in economics? So I would, like, depending on, what I did was I had 3 sets of universities. Like, say, I would look at like in the top 20, I would just have a couple of them. And then I would look at like the medium ranked universities. So if the ranking, say for example, you have universities are ranked from 1 to 60. So I would choose, say, randomly, I would look at like 4 universities in the first, ranked from 1 to 10. I will choose another 4 from like rank 50 to 60. And then I will choose somewhere between like a couple of them or 10 of them who are ranked between 20 to 40. So I would have like different types of universities I'll start looking up. So I'll go to their website and I'll open faculty in economics. I'll search for faculty in economics. So every faculty's profile will come up, and then I look for their CV, or their website will have their research publications. So I look for like what have they published in, what are the papers that they're publishing. Does the topic interest me? Is that something that I want to do? So that's how I take a decision or shortlist which universities to apply to, because the application is costly. So every application, the more universities you apply to, you are going to incur a lot more costs. So application is costly, so you have to be very wise in deciding which universities to apply to. So the majority of time that you should spend in your 1 year before applying should be in shortlisting what are the universities that you want to apply, purely based on how closely your research interest and the faculty research interest match. That's a good way to identify or shortlist the universities. So that is something that would take a lot of time. And in the meantime, you should be giving your GRE and TOEFL. A lot of universities have dropped the requirement of a GRE now, so probably you don't have to do that, but look that up. You should give a GRE, you should take your TOEFL test, and in the meantime. And then you start writing your applications. Like, you should have a basic format. Choose one university and just write for them. So you should start having like an Excel sheet saying that, okay, university 1, the deadline is this. So what are the documents required? So finish off a complete application. Don't sit on an application. Try to improve it word by word. Instead, try to finish off one draft and then send it around to as many people as possible so that they can edit it, make it better. And so you make a statement of purpose or like a personal statement, depending on some universities ask for. It's kind of the same thing. Most universities ask for 3 letters of recommendations, which is something that you have to arrange well before time. So I think around November, like mid-November, the application deadlines will begin. So you have to make sure that you have all those ready, all these letters of recommendation ready. You should have your statement of purpose. You should have your TOEFL and GRE scores, whatever is required, and your shortlisted universities by, say, mid-November. This is the ideal situation. Even if you fall, even if you haven't done anything in July, things can work out, because I am a perfect example of that. I wasn't planning to go for a PhD program in the year I applied. So I had, some things, some other things worked out, and some of one of my professors with whom I was working, she kind of like really strongly pushed me to apply. And when she told me, it was around like end of October, but still I could manage. So it's okay, like even if you are not able to follow this timeline, it's okay, but this is the best case scenario. This is the best way that you could do it. This is something that I would have done if I could go back. So this is the timeline I would suggest.
Can you explain the selection criteria in US for PhD programs?
The selection criteria, like we often say that it's quite random. So there is no rule, like there's no set rule that, like we have here, you write an entrance exam. If you're above this cutoff, you're going to get through this university. There's no written rule like that. It's more or less random. But you can get the best bet by applying to places, by choosing the right university, by applying to places which matches your interest, research interest the most. So basically, look at it this way. I'm going to apply to a university in economics of education. My objective is that I want to have advisors who know this entire field very well, so that they can advise me well and give me a good training in economics of education. On the other side, when the professors are deciding which student to take in, they're also looking at students who will make the best use of that department and do really well, so which brings accolades to that university. So in that way, if you kind of like spend some time figuring out which universities match your research interest really well, you probably would make it. Also, another thing which I would like to point out is you look at the ranking and you often want to apply in only the top universities. So if you end up applying the top 20 universities, you may not get through. So which is why I would always suggest, you may be very brilliant, you may get through the best university, but what if you don't? As a backup plan, apply to medium ranked universities, apply to low ranked, and even there are universities which are not ranked at all, but you don't lose anything. It's always better to go there, spend a year. They pay for you anyway, so they spend a year, and even if it's a low ranked or not ranked university, get through. If you get an admission there, go there, you will have more opportunities. You can apply for a much better university a year later than staying back in India and trying to improve the CV. Because as I mentioned earlier, letters of recommendation is one requirement for most of the admissions. And an advantage that US students who are going to apply along with us is that their professors are based in US. So most of the universities can recognize these names very easily when they write a letter of recommendation. Unlike for us, our professors may not be very popular in the universities that we apply to, right? So it's always better to have a US professor writing a recommendation for you than an Indian professor when you apply. So if it happens that you applied this year, you got through a very low ranked or a not ranked university, I would suggest take it up, go there, study for a year, see if it is possible for you, and then apply for a better university if you want to, because you're not incurring any cost, rather than staying back in India and figuring out what to do in that 1 year. It will always be a good option. So one thing is the selection criteria, although it is random, I don't know about a set rule, but the best you can do is to apply to universities which match your interests the best. The worst thing that can happen to a PhD student is to end up in a department, however high ranked it is, but have a research interest which is very different from all the faculty there or the other students there, and not get any support. I mean, that's the worst situation that you want to be in. So that is, selection of which universities to apply would actually determine the selection criteria, so to say. So that is somewhere that you want to spend time on. Letters of recommendation is another place that you want to be very careful about who is going to write for you. So for me, I was working as a research assistant after my master's for a few years before I applied for the PhD program, which I think is a good strategy, although I did not plan it. But it's good to have some kind of research experience. You will definitely be at a better position if you have some kind of research experience. So being a research assistant for some project, even if most of these projects may not even pay you very well. The first project I was part of was a Delhi School of Economics project. I had to be in villages of Uttar Pradesh for almost 2 years. So it was a difficult life. But now when I look back, it was a very wonderful experience. It did not pay me a lot, so to say, compared to my friends who were in the corporate sector. It did not pay me as much, but it did give me a great opportunity, a wonderful recommendation letter, and an upper hand in research experience after I joined the PhD program. So that's a good thing, that choosing who would write a letter of recommendation for you. Even if you do not have someone who is a US based or someone who graduated from US to write for you, it's fine. But do not choose a professor who would write a generic letter of recommendation. It should be someone who knows you very personally, who would write about you at a very personal level. So that is how you can actually, win the attention of the admission committee, is by having personalized letters of recommendation. That's another way to improve your application. Choosing the right universities which match your interests, choosing the right people to write your letter of recommendation, and if possible, in case you are at a point, you have done your master's, you do not know what to do next, whether you should do some certification course or some coding course or something like that, I would certainly suggest you take up some research assistant job. That would be very helpful.
Is it possible for you to work while doing your PhD?
Here is the thing. In most cases, when you get through a PhD program in the US, when you get admitted, you will receive a tuition waiver, meaning you don't have to pay any tuition fees. Plus, you will be paid a stipend. It's similar to what we get here when we do a PhD in India. So you get a stipend, but in return, you will have to be, you'll have three options. You can be a research assistant. You may be assigned to be a research assistant, meaning you'll assist some professor in their research, or you will be a teaching assistant, meaning you'll be assisting some professor who is taking an undergraduate or a graduate course, or you'll be an instructor, meaning you will be taking a course for undergraduate, meaning bachelor students. So you get paid for that. So I don't pay any tuition fees at all, but I'll have to pay out of the stipend that I get, which is enough to sustain in the US. I travel back to India more or less twice a year. And all my expenses get managed in the stipend I get. So which is enough, in spite of the fact that I live in a city. So it's a very different if you choose to live in a city or like in the suburbs. So my university is located in the heart of the city. It's very near to Chicago downtown. So it's expensive. It's more expensive. Everything is more expensive there. So in spite of the fact, I'm able to manage my expenses and my stipend. The only expense that I have to incur at the university is $1,000 for a semester. So a semester would be from, so it starts in August to December. August starts in August, ends in December. That is one semester. That's called the fall semester. Then you have another semester which starts in January and ends in May. That's called the spring semester. So in each semester, I'll have to spend around like $1,000, which is part of like, which will cover something called like, health center fees, a part of my insurance, medical insurance, and membership to the graduate student union and etc. So that's the only school university related expenses that I have to incur from my pocket, and I can my stipend pays for all of that.
Why does it take longer to complete a PhD program in US versus in Europe?
So US definitely takes longer than Europe, because US, at least in my department, the minimum number of years that people take to graduate is like say 4.5 to 5 years, and the average is 6 years. So the thing is, unlike Europe, where you start off when you're applying for a university in the Europe, you need to have a very clear research proposal. You already know that what you're going to research on. You already are telling like, this is how you plan to do the research. And then you choose a place and a faculty who matches your your research interest, and then you get admission, and then you start your research. In the US, on the other hand, you start with your coursework. You don't have to start with your research. You shouldn't, or you don't have to. You start with your coursework. It's very similar to doing a master's program, but extremely intensive than anything that we are used to. So the idea is they strengthen your understanding of basics of your field. Then they expose you to different fields within your subject. So I had to take, during my coursework, I had to take macro econometrics 1 and 2. Econometrics I had to take 1, 2 and 3. So which is like my basic coursework, which is called the core courses. Then I was exposed to something called field courses, like say economics of education, labor economics, development economics, and public economics. So different fields within your subject you're exposed to. Then you get to choose. You can come with a preconceived research idea, it's fine, but you still have the option to explore more research interests, to learn more fields more closely, more deeply, and then decide what your research should be. So that extra 2 years of like strengthening your base, makes the US PhD programs longer, and in fact like much more strenuous. But today, looking back, I'm done with my coursework. I have done with an additional year, which is I'm done with my third year, almost done with my third year. But now when I look back, I think it was very essential for me. Like the coursework was extremely essential for me, because the training is very good. Like the training that you get during the coursework is amazing. So it adds a lot of value to your ability to learn, ability to critically analyze things. So which makes it, so this is extra 2 years of coursework which makes the US PhDs longer.
What type of visa do you hold? Are there provisions for accommodating spouse and children?
I hold an F1 visa. It's a student visa. It is issued for 5 years. So I got it in 2017. It's until 2022. But they'll give me extensions on the visa depending on how long I take to complete my PhD. if you have a spouse or a child, they will be issued something called an F2 visa, which is a dependent of a student visa. The thing with those is the children can definitely study, but your spouse cannot work. They cannot earn any money in the US, or they cannot even register, they cannot even study on F2 visa. So the only thing that they can engage in is kind of like recreational activities. They can learn, like they can join like cooking courses or pottery classes or things like that, but they can't join for a real course. But this should not deter you, because if your spouse is also someone who wants to do a PhD or who is very academically inclined, then you can definitely go there together. Let that person be on F2 visa, explore opportunities, see what are the universities that person can apply to as well, and then the visa can get converted from F2 to F1. So the other person can also be in a student visa. So some arrangement can be worked out. So there are opportunities. There are many opportunities which you can figure out once you are in the US, or once you have some people who have already been in the US, who are already students. You should be able to figure out something. But at least, like for now, like the first, if it's just you joining a PhD program, your family would be getting an F2 visa, and your spouse would not be able to work or register for courses in the US. Your children can learn, can go to school there.
Is the stipend enough to cover your travel and accommodation expenses?
Yeah, the stipend is enough to cover, as I mentioned earlier. Like I have been most of the years I travel, I definitely come at least once a year, or it ends up like twice a year. But I can manage that from my stipend. I can manage my rent. I mean, all the expenses in the US and all the expenses, of myself, even when I'm in India, I can manage all of that from my stipend. You don't get any extra, travel allowance, or like you get travel allowance for conferences, but you don't get travel allowance for traveling to your home country and stuff like that. You have to manage from your stipend, but you do get enough to cover all that.
Did you ever experience any racial discrimination?
I haven't personally experienced any racial discrimination as yet in the US. Yeah, no.